Quran 11:1 says, "This is a book whose verses give clear instructions explained by a wise, knowledgeable Lord." The Quran claims to be clear, decisive, and perfectly constructed. But the true Quran is in Arabic, so how can we know? Far from being a problem, we can use translations to test the Quran's claims. If the Quran really is clear and decisive, then devoted Muslims who translate the Quran into English should give equivalent translations. Not identical words, of course, but the same idea. If different translators describe different ideas, then the meaning of the Quran can't be clear. For example, two translators say, "My cat needs a bath," and "My cat needs to be washed," then that's fine. But if they say, "My cat needs a bath," and "My cat likes to be left alone," then we would wonder why the translators are so confused. If many translators differ like this, there must be something unclear about the original. In particular, moral guidance should be the most clear and decisive. So let's have a close look at a moral command in the Quran. At IslamAwakened.com, there are 36 generally accepted translations. We'll use this sample. Turn to Quran 434. Here is the first translation at the top of the page. "Men shall take full care of women with the bounties which God has bestowed more abundantly on the former than on the latter, and with what they may spend out of their possessions. And the righteous women are the truly devout ones, who guard the intimacy which God has ordained to be guarded. And for those women whose ill will you have reason to fear, admonish them first, then leave them alone in bed, then beat them. And if thereupon you pay heed, do not seek to harm them. Behold, God is indeed most high great." Anything that is in some kind of bracket has been added by the translator. If it's not in the Arabic, then we'll ignore it because the Arabic Quran is the real Quran. So let's focus on this. What is the third command for dealing with a woman whose ill will you have reason to fear? This translation says beat them. Is the Arabic so clear and decisive though? Let's take a look at some other translations to see. Of the 36 translations, 15 say to beat your wife. That's 42%. That's less than 50, so let's look at the other options. 5 translations say to strike your wife. 2 say to hit your wife. 1 says to spank your wife. 1 says to scourge your wife. 1 says to apply force to your wife. It says a minimum of force, but the word minimum is not in the Arabic text. There are no further instructions. Further, 2 translations say to discipline or chastise your wife. With no further instructions in the Quran, the method seems up to you. We can count those as consistent with beating. That's a total of 27 out of 36 translations, or 75%, that say to beat, scourge, beat, discipline, hit, beat, strike, 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 beat, strike, hit, beat, chastise, spank, apply force, beat your wife. If they were all like this, then the command of the Quran would be clear and decisive about beating your wife. To be clear, there are no further instructions about how to beat your wife. There is nothing in the Arabic about a last resort, or gently, or not in their faces, or even if necessary, or with a toothbrush. It just says beat your wife. However, they don't all agree that you should beat your wife. 7 translations say that you should separate, turn away, go away from them, depart, or withdraw. That's very different. By a strange coincidence, all 7 translations were created in the 21st century. 1 translation says to keep admonishing your wife, which means only to use words. That's very different. Finally, Ahmed Ali says go to bed with him. That seems like wishful thinking. Nice try, Ahmed. So, is the Quran clear and decisive? There are 3 options. Number 1, the Quran is not clear and decisive. We don't know whether the original Arabic Quran is trying to command you to beat your wife, or to separate from her, or something else. That's why the translations are so divided. So, the Quran's claim to be clear and decisive is false. Number 2, the Quran is clear and decisive. You should beat your wife if you have any reason to fear her ill will. In that case, other translations show that devout Muslims today are perfectly okay with mistranslating the Quran to make it more acceptable to 21st century audiences. Why should I trust any Muslim translation of the Quran if Muslims are perfectly okay with twisting the meaning? Number 3, the Quran is clear and decisive. You should separate from your wife if you have any reason to fear her ill will, but that creates a problem. If the Quran is clear and decisive, where did almost every translator before the 21st century get the idea that you should beat your wife? In any case, it should be clear that relying on the Quran for moral guidance is a terrible idea. If it's not clear, that's bad. And if it is clear, that's even worse.